Top5rapwebsite.com. You already know what's going on. Today I want to talk a little bit about the Joe Budden Network, or Joe Budden TV as it's called now again. They changed their name on YouTube. And I've been meaning to make this video for a while now, but I don't like kicking people when they're down, and y'all know my channel is mostly music focused. I'm mostly on here talking about music. I'm rarely on here just talking about people or musicians' personal lives. But the Joe Budden situation has been something that I've been watching closely since he left Everyday Struggle, Complex and Everyday Struggle, because it's kind of been like a business case study. You know, as someone who with an interest in business, I studied business in school. I like monitoring these things and seeing what's going on. So there's a couple points that I want to hit, and I've kind of broken the video apart in the description so you can go to whichever section you'd like, or just start from the beginning and watch all the way through. That's the best way. Firstly, I want to say Joe Budden is a guy who's, over his career, he's displayed resilience and he's displayed perseverance. So he's had way more devastating moments than what's happening right now, and has come back for them. So again, I'm not making this to shit on anybody. It's not what I do. So when I look at the Joe Budden Network, and again, I've been really watching specifically the YouTube channel, because I don't know where their home page is. I don't know where their home base is. We'll get to that later. I've been watching the YouTube and subscribers and the stats, because I have my own YouTube channel. I'm super into the analytics. So I like to see, just what they're doing, because he kind of led the way for creators. He's kind of putting himself up there as like, I am the, basically CEO of creators, you know what I mean? So I've noticed they've been stuck like at 912, 913 subscribers for like almost a month now. And for a channel with already 900,000 plus people on it, to go from 912 to 913 and to have that take about a week and a half, 2 weeks, as of posting, they're still at 913. It's like the more subscribers you have, the easier it is to get more subscribers. Going from 10 subscribers to 100 is tough, because you only have 10 and you gotta brick by brick it. But when you have 100 subscribers, it's a lot easier to get to 200 than it was to get to 100, because you already have 100 people watching now. So to have 900,000 people, almost 1 million people, and you're only getting about 1,000 new subscribers, not even that per week, and you're posting actively. It's not like the channel's inactive. You're posting actively, and then there's a lot of money being poured into this. All the featured images and these are things I noticed, because I do it myself for my website and my YouTube. All the featured images, beautiful. Camera work, beautiful. Sound quality, even the venue where you're hosting, all this has kind of costs to it. It's a costly process to not be gaining subscribers. And if I look at the YouTube, and I know YouTube, I don't know if this is their home base. They changed their name on YouTube from Joe Budden Network to Joe Budden TV. So I would assume that the YouTube means something to them. But I can't imagine that YouTube is their home base when like most of their episodes have like this huge audio portion that's bleeped out. At least 15 to 20% of the episode is muted, because like they're playing music. Like, you gotta stop playing music unless you're on your main platform, wherever that may be. And I'm just kind of ranting here, but maybe your main platform is SoundCloud, and when we listen on SoundCloud, we can hear everything. But if your main platform is YouTube and like 10 to 20% of your episode is muted, you just gotta stop playing music during the episode so we can enjoy it. So if I'm looking at the YouTube, and this is the free content, and the free content is not doing great, I can only imagine what the Patreon numbers are looking like. If it's taking a week and a half, 2 weeks to go from 912,000 subscribers to 913,000, if it's taking like 2 weeks to do that on YouTube where it's free, I can only imagine the Patreon numbers are lower, and I can only imagine the Patreon numbers matter because there's some type of contractual agreement, that of which I don't know, but that could be the source of the discontent. So I haven't even mentioned that Rory and Mal, I have not returned to the show as of posting, but I wanted to make this video even before that. Like I was noticing like there's some issues going on here even before I knew there was discontent with the co-hosts on the podcast. Just looking at the YouTube numbers and looking at the new shows. Again, I wanted to do this video a while ago, but I don't want to, cast that bad juju out there. But now other YouTubers are doing it. Other people are reporting on it. Angela Yee, I love you, Angela Yee. She just put, this situation on her rumor mill, on her rumor report on the Breakfast Club. So people are talking about it now. It's not just up to me to speculate. I don't listen to the full podcasts anymore. I kind of skip around. So I was missing the tension between the co-hosts anyways. Whatever tension there was, I wasn't really catching it like other people were anyways. I won't use this video to kind of talk too much about the Rory, Mal, Joe Budden breakup situation, because there was issues before that. What I want to talk about right here is we can't overvalue ourselves, right? We have to correctly value ourselves. We have to realize that the market is in the business market, it's about timing, and it's not about fairness. It's not about none of that. It's about timing, and it's about profitability. When Joe Budden went to Complex, he continued to do his podcast. Smart. Complex may not even know what to do at the time. They probably didn't even care. They probably wouldn't even allow someone to do that today. Like, if you're going to do a podcast while doing our show, we need a bit of that podcast. But at the time, that wasn't the situation. So smart. Joe Budden continued to do the podcast while doing the show. DJ Academics continued streaming while doing Everyday Struggle, which is great. The massive size of Complex, despite how you feel about them, despite how you feel about their writers, the size, the infrastructure, and the resources of Complex to put you in a studio, to have the editing team, to be like, yo, all you gotta do is come in, talk, and leave. All you gotta do is come in at this time, talk, and leave. Everything else is handled. And for a guy like me, that means a lot, because I'm a guy that preps the camera, shoots the shit. If there's an issue during, I gotta go fix it. I'm editing, I'm publishing, and I'm doing the fucking the featured images on Photoshop. I'm doing everything. So for a company to come in and be like, yo, all you gotta do is come in and then just do your album review. Just talk to the camera. We'll handle the rest. Bruh, that takes like 80% of what it takes to do this out. Like, now I got so much extra time. So I think for Joe, I don't think he fully gave Complex credit for their role in his podcast's growth, because Complex is this huge thing, and it allows you to, it's bringing so much more attention to your name, which is bringing it to your podcast. Joe Budden was on Everyday Struggle every single weekday for X amount of months/years. And that helped feed his podcast, which allowed him to get that Spotify deal. If you're not on Complex Everyday Struggle, if Complex doesn't have you there, your podcast may not be valued at what it was to get that initial Spotify deal. So instead of leaving Complex, burning the bridge and leaving with a bird, flipping the bird, we maybe could have left a little bit more amicably. I don't know, or at least acknowledge, like, yeah, Complex helped us out a lot. The Spotify deal wouldn't have, your numbers were what they were partially because of Complex. You were on Complex every day, and that was helping you, which allowed you to get the Spotify deal. And it's like the same thing happened with Spotify. He's on Spotify, and Spotify is bringing you so many more viewers. Even myself, like, I knew what the Joe Budden podcast was. I didn't watch it though. Like, I would say 2017, 2018, if I'm getting the dates correct. I knew what it was. I never watched the full episode. There's just no reason. Like, I don't particularly care what Joe Budden has to say about things. But when the podcast came to Spotify, I was already a Spotify listener. I was already a premium subscription. So when this podcast came to Spotify, it just made it that much more easier for me to listen. It was nothing for me to just turn the Joe Budden podcast on and listen. And probably for an entire year, I've listened to probably every single episode of the Joe Budden podcast, just because it was so convenient. Like, I can go to work. Like, I'm at work anyways, listening to music anyways. Now it's the same app. Like, I just type in Joe Budden and just go straight to his podcast, I can listen to all of it. I don't think Joe Budden truly gave Spotify credit again for how much they helped him. It was mutual, because he helped them develop their podcast infrastructure in a way, but they helped him. And I go and listen to the old Joe Budden podcast episodes, and he's talking about how it's just a situation of overvaluing yourself. It happens in the stock market, it happens in crypto, overvaluing. He's saying he's bringing in 9 figures, he's saying this and that, but then months later, when you pull the curtains back and you're no longer on Spotify, like, you're bringing in 9 figures, you're bringing in millions of listeners. Okay, maybe that's true, but maybe some of that is true because of what Spotify is putting into it. Because when you leave Spotify, I don't know the last time the Joe Budden TV on YouTube, I don't know the last time that channel had a 1 million view video. So it certainly wasn't that the podcast was bringing in millions of views and 9 figures. 9 figures is hundreds of millions of dollars. So that wasn't the case. The podcast doesn't even get 1 million views on its own, on YouTube. So that wasn't the case. And I doubt that 9 figures are coming in to Patreon from the subscriptions. I doubt 8 figures. I doubt 6 figures are coming in to Patreon. So it wasn't that the Joe Budden podcast on Spotify was bringing this company so much value, and we're running this thing, and y'all need to be giving us more respect. And it's like, shouldn't even be compared to Joe Rogan's podcast, which is one name that was repeated often during this time. Joe Rogan, he was doing his deal also with Spotify around this time. Joe Rogan is a guy who gets 1 million views on anything. Everything on YouTube from Joe Rogan has 1 million views. And the podcasts are different. Joe Rogan's is based on interviewing people. Joe Budden's is based on just kind of talking amongst people. But it doesn't matter who Joe Rogan interviews. Joe Rogan has like millions of people who are following his podcast just to hear him. It doesn't matter who he's interviewing, it's getting 1 million. Now, if it's someone crazy like Elon Musk or Kanye West, that's going to do crazy numbers, but everything's getting 1 million. I think there's an overvaluing, and I don't think Joe gave enough credit or credence to how much his partners helped him. Not his partners Rory and Mal, his partners Complex, his partners Spotify. Like, they helped the podcast get to that point because they made you extremely accessible. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so let's talk about the content itself, because these are the content kings of content. It's just very interesting business decision making, right? So you leave Spotify. So Joe knew he was leaving Spotify for a while before he left. I mean, on the podcast, he's basically prepping the viewers for this months in advance. But in hindsight, it's like the only thing he did was tell us, like, yo, we're leaving, don't get too comfortable. Like, he would tell the fans, like, we're leaving this dump, we're leaving, burning a bridge that doesn't need to be burned. But that's neither here nor there. But instead of just bragging or telling us you're going to leave, it might have been a good idea to acclimate your audience with the new personalities that you plan to feature on your network, like Ming Lee, like the See the Thing Is podcast girls whose names escape me at the moment. You might have wanted to feature them as a guest on the podcast while you were still on Spotify. You might have wanted to, all those times you call people from the phone on the podcast, you might have wanted to call one of them, script some stuff, stage something to where you can introduce them to your audience in the natural way. Now, again, I stopped watching like the full episode of the Joe Budden podcast, I want to say like 2019. I was really in for it, for like when Pusha T Drake was going on. I like hearing music talk. So as they slowly stepped away from music, like I don't want to hear gossip. Like, I don't listen to talk show, I don't listen to stuff like that. It's not interesting to me. It would have been a good idea to acclimate your audience with those people, especially while you're still on Spotify. So again, I don't think they appreciated the value that Spotify was bringing. Sure, okay, let's say they did some messed up stuff. Let's say they did you dirty. There's some value still that they're bringing. I don't think they fully appreciated the value that Spotify was bringing. Hey, let's use this last month, these last 2 weeks. Let's bring this girl on. She's going to have her own podcast on our network. None of our audience, we have not introduced her to our audience at all. It's probably a good idea to have her on at least or on one show. Or maybe it did happen and I missed it. If it happened, I must have missed that episode. So, I mean, excuse me, if it did happen, maybe it should have happened more. Because when the See the Thing Is podcast and the Girl I Guess podcast came out, it's kind of like, who are these people? It's kind of like the Joe Budden team, which is banking on these people are popular on social media. This is going to go crazy. Like, they're popular people on social media. Of course, their podcast is going to go crazy. Because even Karen Civil, who's well known in the hip hop community, some of her videos is only, like, she's barely scraping 10,000. Like, she's getting above 10. At this point, she's getting just above 10,000, like, on the last, in the 25th hour. You know what I'm saying? But again, it's like banking on Karen Civil's name. Like, oh, they know Karen Civil. Her podcast is gonna go crazy. Like, you still have to. There's a certain amount of respect that you gotta have for the audience. Like, you have to prep your audience for this. Just to throw out a new show. And let me look at the YouTube. There are 6 shows. Pull up. See the Thing Is, the Joe Budden Podcast, Girl I Guess, the Joe Budden Podcast cartoon, and State of the Culture. Alright, so let's start with State of the Culture. We haven't seen one of those episodes. It's been, 2 years? Scotty Beam left that show. That show pretty much stopped after Scotty Beam left. So a co-host left State of the Culture. See the Thing Is, I believe her name is Olivia. A co-host left that show. The Joe Budden Podcast, you got Rory and Mal, 2 co-hosts, left that show. So you look, it's six. It's a network, right? It's 6 shows. And here's another thing. I don't think they understand their audience. I don't think Joe Budden understands his audience. You got 6 shows, right? Out of those 6, Pull Up does not happen anymore. State of the Culture doesn't happen anymore. So you really got 4 shows. Out of those 4 shows, the Joe Budden Podcast cartoon, that's not really a show. That's just, an animator taking clips from the podcast and putting cartoons over it. So let's say there are 6 shows, but 3 are actually shows. So the 3 we have left are the Joe Budden Podcast, which is, experiencing some turmoil right now, Girl I Guess, and See the Thing Is. Those 2 other podcasts, Girl I Guess and See the Thing Is, being women-based podcasts. And this is another thing. I don't understand why Joe Budden thought it would be a good idea to have. Here's the thing, it's not just that it's women-based. Just because they're women doesn't mean they can't pull in views. But it's just strange on your network, on the Joe Budden network, and Joe Budden looking at his own podcast. Like, he talks about stats and data and analytics. At the very least, I assume you have your gender demographics data. Like, you can access that on YouTube. You can just click on analytics and access that. It's like one of the most simple data that they give you on every website. I'm sure you can see that most of your audience is male. So, like, the first thought to have an all-woman podcast is just interesting. Because even the women who watch your show don't watch your show to want to hear these women talk about these topics in this way. Like, they're watching your show to get a certain viewpoint because they have a certain viewpoint, or they like hearing your viewpoint. So to go and get a women podcast, all women podcast, it's an interesting move. It's not just the fact that it's all women. It's just the fact that it doesn't, like, nothing in your data says to do that. Like, how did you make that business decision? Like, none of the data says to do that. And then that the all women base is one thing. To include another podcast, to assume that the network needs another podcast is also bold. It's like, does the data say that? And then you see the Thing Is go. It was going again. I was watching all this. It was struggling. The first episode did well, but it's a podcast that struggles to get 40,000-50,000 views. with all due respect, to everyone there, because the co-host of See the Thing Is, she has her own podcast that does well. Like, her shit's just not working on the Joe Budden Network. Like, her normal podcast stuff works. So then to look at the data and then to be like, yo, See the Thing Is not working. You've put money into this, you've put time, you've put effort that you're not going to get back. They're not increasing the Patreon numbers substantially. They're not drawing even anywhere near the numbers that the Joe Budden Podcast draws on their YouTube page. So then the next business decision to be, after you see the Thing Is struggling, the next thing you say is, let's go get another podcast and another women-based podcast with more just popular social media people. Now I can see if like these are like, let's say Earn Your Leisure. They're talking about entrepreneurship. They're talking about food, travel. Even if it was something with a topic, even if it was a podcast with a topic, you now have 3 podcasts that are all in the exact same shadow. It's just social people who are popular on social media talking about social media topics. Random social media topics. It's like no one is an expert at anything. It's like no one's gonna, it's like, it would be more interesting if someone was like an expert on sports or an expert on fucking fabrics. So where when there's a dead day or a lull in content, at least this person can always just resort back and give you just fire content on sports. They got something that their expertise is on. You really listen to an expert professional. So I'm not saying that these people are not professionals. Karen Civil does business. All these people do business. But it's like 3 podcasts with random people, right? No theme. And then 2 of the 3 podcasts don't even match what the audience looks for. It's like no one's watching these. You have 900,000 subscribers on YouTube, and only 20 to 40,000 are converting over to watch these shows. Even less for the Karen Civil show. So it's just very strange business decisions. And I started my eyebrow raised after I saw See the Thing Is tanking. I saw that show tanking after, it was some episodes in. It was struggling. They even brought Rory on for an episode, which was their most viewed episode to this day. So that shows Joe Budden, like, your people from your podcast will transition over and watch that show if it's interesting to them. Because the episode with Rory got like 200,000 views. Nothing they've done has touched that number. Like, those are Joe Budden Podcast numbers, 200,000. So your fans are telling you, like, yeah, we'll transition over and watch this show, like, when it's interesting to us. So it's just strange business decisions to do that. Now, for me, I don't even have Joe Budden's YouTube data. I don't have any of that. But when you look at something simple like his social media, and you look at his Twitter replies, and you look at who's engaging, and you look at his YouTube comments, and you see who's engaging, mostly a male audience. Doesn't mean they don't want women shows. Make it shows that are appealing to them, though, based on what the data says. Because I'm sure even a lot of the women that listen to the Joe Budden podcast don't listen to these women-based podcasts. It's just not in their fashion, right? So you look at Joe Budden's YouTube comments, you look at his Twitter replies. If you just click, this is what you should do if you're independent. If you are the boss, because you're actually never really the boss. Because if you own all your own stuff, if you're 100% owner, guess who you're beholden to still? The customer. The customer doesn't like something about what you're doing and they stop shopping. You got to change that or you go out of business. You're never truly the boss. You're always beholden to somebody. And if you're at the top of the food chain, you're still beholden to your customers. So it's very important to, number one, respect your customers. Probably won't be a good idea to call them stupid or just take low ball shots at them, especially when you're depending on their Patreon. You're asking for them to subscribe on even less quality content. But anyways, when you look at Joe Budden's, fans, I would say 5 out of 10, when you do that, scroll on social media and you just click on their profile to see who this person is, care about them. 5 times out of 10, they have something about sports. They have a sports cover photo, they have a reference to sports in their name, or they got their favorite team hashtagged. Or even if you just do a quick scroll, skim their timeline, they've talked about sports. So someone with even more data, which would show this, would say, Joe, we should probably add a sports podcast. That probably should have been the first thing. Let me go into my next segment. What should have been done, or what could have been done? It should have been a sports podcast, because they already kind of go into sports on their flagship podcast, the Joe Budden Podcast. And they get good engagement. There's small bits where they talk about sports, even if it's just small, saying something people agree with. People talk about that. That kind of semi-trends, depending on your timeline for a day. So I don't know why the first move was to go get a bunch of women on the podcast. Maybe they just wanted women energy around them. You want some, I don't know, you want to tell somebody what to do. One of the first things should have been a sports podcast. Really, the first thing should have been Rory should have got his own show. Because Rory draws in a lot of audience. We just talked about how you just brought 200,000 viewers to a struggling See the Thing Is podcast. He wasn't on that podcast the week following, and they went right back to the views they were used to getting. So Rory should have had his own show. Rory's probably had opportunities to leave the podcast. I remember at one point they were talking about a show called Rory and Nori with Drink Champs host Nori. He should have had his own show. It should be Rory and Parks or Rory and somebody talking about music. I don't know why you go out. I don't know why the business decision was to go out and get, how many girls was it at first on See the Thing Is? 2 to 4 girls? Unless you just, I don't know what data set to do that, right? So I can see how it will be frustrating for a Rory, a Mal, especially if your part of your income is dependent on Patreon subscribers. Like, bro, this shit's not getting us no subscribers. There should have been a sports podcast. So instead of going out getting 4 girls for See the Thing Is and 2 more girls for Girl I Guess, Joe, he could have went on YouTube, found a content creator, let's say from his home state, so you could be a hometown guy. Go find a Jets or Giants fan. They play in New Jersey. Go find a Jets or Giants fan, mega fan who has a YouTube, who's actually been doing the groundwork for a year or 2. He's amassed himself to where he has maybe 10,000, 12,000 subscribers. When he posts a video, he getting at least 4,000 or 5,000. He's got engagements, but he just needs that push. Those are the type of guys that you take and be like, okay, boom, I'm gonna put you in my network. All you got to do is come and record, bro. Like, you don't even, like, we seen what you was already doing by yourself. So I'm gonna take you, Giants Jets fan. We're gonna put you on a show, or maybe just, and let's stop with just debuting shows. Let's test them out. Let's bring them on the podcast, have a segment about sports, cut that segment on YouTube, post it isolated on YouTube, and see what it does. And if that does well, let's try it again in 2 weeks. If that does well, bro, let's come in. Let's put you on a pilot episode. If that does well, then let's roll you out. This whole, I'm gonna hire a bunch of women, boom, 20 episodes, no one's watching them. Who made that decision, bro? And who vets the decisions? Or is that a part of the problem? The decision maker does not allow himself to be vetted. So everyone is now affected by bad decisions. Is that the problem? There should have been a sports podcast, and that could have been easy. For a fraction of the cost of what all those girls that you hired for the podcast that gets no views would have cost a fraction. You get yourself a hometown guy. Now you can walk around New Jersey like you're that guy. Now you got more fan favors. You got his group of Giants, Jets fans, whatever. Now they're on the Joe Budden podcast. Now you're not struggling to get 10,000 views on a Girl I Guess podcast. Some of those clips are in the single digit views. Like, it's me posting it on my channel with 3,000 subscribers. That's what some of those clips do. Some of those videos from that podcast. You bring in a guy, you bring in someone who's already been building, but who just needs that little more push. They're already bringing 5,000 in. So you're not gonna have to worry about, is this video only gonna get 2,600 views? Like, he's bringing in 5 just on his own channel. Rory should have had his own channel or his own show. It should have been Rory, maybe even Parks, talking about music. It should have been a music-based podcast or a music-based show. Or they should have just not stepped so far away from discussing music. When you watch the Joe Budden Podcast, their music discussions are like this. All right. Oh, did any new music drop? Let me scroll Spotify new releases. When you already know Spotify, they don't put all the new stuff on new releases. So, I guess nothing came out. Well, no, this person dropped. You listen to that? Nope. Oh, this person dropped. You listen to that? Nope. You listen to this? Oh, y'all heard that? Me too. It was tight. Next. Yeah, that's the music section. So, and there's for me, I listen to the podcast for the music takes. So, I'm sure a lot of other people do too. And Rory is a guy who has a lot of music knowledge. He can talk at length about music. So, you should have, and Parks can too. So, and then I also hear Savon has his own podcast. And the fact that I don't even know this, as someone who listened to the Joe Budden podcast, I think I heard him mentioned a couple times. But the fact that a lot of people still don't know Savon has his own podcast and he's already on the show. Why don't we know that? And why wasn't Savon's podcast, if I heard it's doing well, why wasn't his podcast the first podcast you signed to the network? Now you can really break up the equity and the ownership in the network. Boom. Rory, Ma, Parks, Savon. Now it's really day one. We didn't have to add nobody new for the first. Again, so interesting decision making. Another thing I'll say is, the tables turn quick, bro. So it always remain humble. Because we're at a situation, and even this situation for the Joe Budden TV network, it can turn for him. Joe Budden is a guy, he's one controversial moment away from being back in it. The way he got his most recent push was kind of just based on a controversial moment with Drake. Him running down the street, chasing kids, and his wife beater. All that parlayed into Everyday Struggle, which parlayed into Spotify, which, and ends up where they are now. But he's one controversial moment away. He's one video of him screaming at the mic moment away from him being right back in it. And they say it's not a money thing. Bro, it's a money thing. There's probably some other stuff mixed in there too, like you disrespecting, you not sharing enough about certain things. But this shit comes, like, telling the audience it's not about money is being dishonest to the audience. And like, I don't get, like, you're asking your audience to pay for your content. So saying they went on vacation at first, this happened at first, it's not about money. Bro, this shit is about money. Because if everybody was getting paid, if y'all was on a 9-figure contract, you would be able to put aside some of these issues a lot easier. It's like in the NFL, it's like in the NBA. A lot of those problems is hidden when your team is winning. Yeah, when you undefeated, a lot of those little problems, they get swept under the rug. But when you're losing, yeah, every little problem is magnified. So to tell us like it's not about money, when it so obviously is about that Spotify deal, when it not taking the Spotify deal, and maybe even the decision making on some of these podcasts, when our income is going to be largely dependent on Patreon, to add the types of shows that we did to failure, and then to add another one to even worse failure. You know what I mean? It's a money thing, bruh. All of this is a money thing at the end of the day. The Spotify thing, that's money. Yeah, it has to do with ownership. it has to do with this and that. At the end of the day, all this comes down to why do we care about ownership? Yeah, we want to own it because, you know, there's a morality to it. There's a, you know what I mean, like a yes, like I feel good about that. There's that whole side to it. But you want to own it so when it's time to sell, you get that percentage, 100. You want to own it to where when the ads come in, when the decisions come in for the money, you're making those decisions. Because if it's not about money, then just allow someone else to make the money decisions. No one's gonna do it. It's about money, bro. So to pretend like it's not this is not fooling anyone. Money may not be the only issue, but money is a part of it, and it's probably at the center of it. Yeah, so I think I've said everything I had to say about this. Again, shout out to Joe Budden. He's a guy who, you know, I've made videos on before, all in good nature. You know, when you're up, I'm not gonna shit on him while you're down. You know what I'm saying? It's not what I do. He's a black man. But, you know, stay humble. Because I remember when the Joe Budden podcast was up, the tables turned quick. And like I said, Joe Budden, he's one controversial moment away from the tables either turning in his favor or the shit getting even worse for him. Like, we don't know what can come next, but we know he can come back from it. That's what we know. But I remember when the Joe Budden podcast was up, like 6 months ago, when it was up, there's times where they were shitting on niggas. You know, they were shitting on Charlemagne. I think I remember them shitting on $1 Million Worth of Game. They were shitting on the Breakfast Club. Like, oh, no one goes to the Breakfast Club no more. Like, that ain't the place to go for interviews. Like, who? Breakfast Club just completed a 1 million view video with $1 Million Worth of Game this past week. So Joe Budden TV has not had a 1 million view video in a while. There's a lot of things said about academics when Everyday Struggle got canceled. When that show officially got canceled, they had a lot of things said about that. Now you got DJ Academics. He's on his stream, and in these times when y'all down, when it was up, it was shitting on niggas at times. So how you think Academics feel right now? How you think Charlemagne feel? Charlemagne feels so shat on. There's episodes where they went so hard on Charlemagne. Charlemagne's probably looking at it like, yeah, and you better hope you fix this, because if you don't, I'm signing your boys to the Black Effect network. We gonna have them on their own. They gonna be my co-hosts. He could be looking at it like that, you know. So just remain humble, because again, Joe Budden podcast, it was up about a year ago. They was up, and it was a lot of shit being thrown. So I'm not gonna shit on them in this moment. I think Rory has the ability to do his own show. He has enough music knowledge to where he can do that and garner a core audience. Joe Budden has the ability to do this Joe Budden podcast with 2 different hosts and still have it be good. He's a controversial figure. He's a strong speaker. And just the controversy behind the things he says is going to draw people. You know, it's going to draw people depending on the topic. It's just a self-imploding part and then business decision-making part that just has to be contoured. Because the rollout for this Joe Budden network was a whole bit, like, it was a case study on what not to do. You just drop all these new shows on an unsuspecting audience. You trash everyone on the way out. Like, Joe Budden should still be airing his episodes on Spotify. Like, his new stuff just, like, I'm a guy who listens to the Joe Budden podcast, like, at work and in the car on the way to work. So the fact that he's not, like, I have to download YouTube mobile, which I'm not doing, or SoundCloud in order to listen to the podcast. Like, I'm not doing that. Like, I don't. So for anyone who is listening to the Joe Budden podcast, this is just another example of just terrible business decisions, but something that's really it hugely affects how many views you get. So whoever made the decision, like, yo, we're not gonna put fuck Spotify, we're not putting anything else on there. You burned the bridge that you didn't need to, number 1. Number 2, you really undervalued what Spotify was doing for you, view-wise, and what you guys did for each other. There was a very harmonious I won't say harmonious, productive. There was a very productive relationship. You guys were working hard for them, and they were providing you value also. One example of a terrible business decision that just fucks up the entire business model. You prime your viewers to listen on Spotify. It's 2 years, 1 or 2 years? You've gathered everyone at Spotify. You've used a lot of your resources. You're using interviews, you're using all your shows to push people to Spotify. Now you've got all these people at Spotify, and you leave. You push all these people to Spotify. You leave. You burn the bridge. That means all your Spotify viewers. I can speak for myself, because there were times after Joe Budden left where I would still sometimes go on Spotify and be like, oh snap, he don't air his new episodes on Spotify. Had you not burnt that bridge, you would probably be more privy to the idea of uploading your episodes to Spotify still. But you don't. It's not like you need a deal with Spotify to put your episodes on Spotify. Like, anyone who has a podcast can upload to Spotify. Anyone who has music can upload to Spotify. You just gotta use the right software to do it. So to make the business decision that we've burnt this bridge so bad, we're not even gonna put our new episodes on Spotify, where we put most of our audience, and then we're not gonna transition them to where our new home is. It's like they left Spotify and they thought they were gonna get all these offers, and they didn't get the offer, so they just scrambled to, oh man, Patreon, we'll just take that. But your viewers are not paying viewers. You have not primed them to be paying viewers. Your viewers are still at Spotify confused. A lot of them, a large percentage of them, listen to all your shows, they understood what you were saying, they understand that you're leaving. But a huge majority we're probably still at Spotify waiting on the podcast, or just wondering what's going on, because you didn't transition them out of Spotify, and it's not like you still continue to post your new episodes out of the Spotify deal on those streaming services for those people. Like, they're just like, you've effectively deleted you've deleted a portion of the audience, the Spotify audience. So everyone who listened on the go, like me, that's how I listen to the podcast. I listened on the go, and I listened at work. All those people, they were just left in the dark. The week after they left Spotify, Joe Budden left Spotify, it's in the dark. And Joe Budden says, well, everyone can't go. Well, if you weren't privy, you can't go. But you gotta understand your audience. If that's how you are with your audience, I don't know what type of, like, who treats their customers that way. And then I don't know, bro. It would have been a smart idea to still post your episodes on Spotify, especially as you're building a network. You're still building a network, and you've seen the value that Spotify provides you. Even if it's a week late, still put the episodes, even if not on Spotify, on Tidal. And this is what I think may have happened, just be like, fuck all these streaming services, none of them gave me the deal I wanted, we're not posting it Spotify isn't feeling the loss of the Joe Budden podcast right now. Do you think Spotify is feeling the loss of the Joe Budden podcast? Do you think they're meeting in their meetings like, damn, that podcast numbers is down? Like, no, the Joe Budden podcast is doing that. So again, whoever is making these business decisions and whoever is vetting them, you got to do better. Why would you not continue to post the episodes on Spotify for the people who didn't make it? Why would you not build the network while you were still on Spotify? You knew you were leaving Spotify. Why would you spend months leading your audience to the end of Spotify, but not directing them on where to go? But not acclimating them to the new personalities you plan to host on your network? And then furthermore, why start the network with 2 podcasts that are pretty much the exact same as yours, with no theme, just like yours? One failed and you put one out that's in the exact same fashion. The business decisions, whoever is making these business decisions, stop making them. The good business decisions appear to stop happening after the complex everyday struggle leave. That was the last good business decision. After that, it's been sketchy, bruh. So maybe that's part of the current issue they're having. Again, I don't want to get into Rory and Miles' personal issues, because I would have made this video. I wanted to make this video before I even knew that was a thing. Right? The channel is struggling a bit, but there's always time for a comeback. So, again, obviously this is a podcast that I've watched in the past. I'll continue to tune in when I can, and I'm gonna continue to check on the channel, because it's a case study. I've been watching this development since the everyday struggle days, and now we're here. So I think it's just a classic case of, you have the stock market, the stock breaks up, it peaks, and it's hard to sell. It's hard to sell at a peak and it's hard to know that you're at the peak, because you're just getting so much money. You're so hot. It's hard to sell at that moment. But if you don't sell when the stock is like this, you're going to get burned by the dip. And I think right now, maybe 6 months to a year ago, the Joe Budden Podcast was here, and now we're at the point where it's either going to go down or it's going to and go back up, or it might plateau. I mean, we'll see. But it's just interesting. The independent route is not the easy route. So if you're not willing to do the groundwork, if you're not really willing to understand your customers, if you're not willing to try new stuff and fail in public, the major deal is just a better way to go. It gives you the infrastructure. You can point fingers at people as to why things aren't working. When it's independent, it's all you, so it's all on you. So, Charlemagne with the Black Effect, he went with iHeartMedia. He's worked with iHeartMedia, for decades now, with the Breakfast Club and with other ventures. So he's able to do certain things, but this could play out well for Joe Budden in the future if he maintains his podcast, if he maintains his network, and he manages to get things right. We look back 3, 4, or 5 years, all these people still in their same deals. If the landscape changes, a person with ownership, a person with independence, they may be up in line and more prepared for that next big deal. But I never want to throw dirt on nobody's name, so I hope this video isn't taken as that. I'm a business student, so it's just business.